For more than a decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mandel. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Along with Dave Manouk, I'm your host, Drew Mandel. Ezra Ginsburg serving a one-show suspension for conduct detrimental to Dave's house. Crumbs, folks. Don't leave crumbs at Dave Manouk's house. He will be upset and he will suspend you accordingly. We look forward to welcoming Ezzy back next week. But Dave, we are obviously here on this Saturday morning. You know, as I was preparing for the show yesterday, I'm like, this has sort of been the quiet week of the Jets offseason. There really hadn't been a lot of anything Jets related. Lo and behold, that changed late yesterday when the announcement we were all expecting, not necessarily yesterday, but we were all expecting it inevitably. The announcement we were all expecting finally was made. Scott Arniel is now the fourth head coach in non-interim variety, with all apologies to Dave Lowry, in Jets 2.0 history. That announcement coming late yesterday. Seemed inevitable, took a little bit longer than I expected, but Scott Arniel does get the job that he was so eager and desirous of, as he said in his in the Rick Bowness retirement press conference when asked point blank if he wanted to be the next head coach of the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, Drew, you're right, and it's not really a surprise. It's kind of a foregone conclusion. We anticipated this, and the Jets did their due diligence. They spoke to guys like Craig Berube and Dean Evison from Flin Flon and Todd McClellan, and I know that there was some thought that they may wait for AHL guys to be available, i.e. Todd Nelson from the Hershey Bears, who probably will still be playing for another 2 or 3 weeks with his club. Well, not playing, but coaching his club for another few weeks. Although I haven't checked the state of their series, but usually Hershey's is in it to win it. So I know that some folks were hoping for him to hear from him, at least the Jets had spoken to him. But yeah, I mean, Scott Arniel took this job 2 years ago, and his intention was to be, the head coach. And Marat wrote about it in the Athletic, and this was something that he wanted. He came back to, he interviewed for that role, right? That was
he interviewed for the job that Rick Bowness got. That
Rick Bowness would inevitably would secure, and he signed on as his associate coach. And you don't just hand the reins to him because he's, again, I know that folks are going to be upset. There's a lot of, there's been a lot of reaction from everyone in terms of this hire. But yeah, I mean, look, he's put in the time. And for those who point out that PK is his purview, it was last year when they were 26th ranked or something like that. 20 somewhere in the 20s,
in the bottom third of the league for sure.
But conversely, the year before he was also in charge of the PK when they were the 7th best penalty kill in the NHL. So I mean, again, there's things that he's going to have to do. He's going to have to bring in. We're not sure about the status of the other assistant coaches on the staff, Brad Lauer, Marty Johnson. So we know the Wade Flaherty is untouchable, really, but it's the question in terms, and of course, Matt Prefontaine, the video coach, Drew, but we'll find that out on Monday when they have their media availability at 11 o'clock. Of course, that will be on our YouTube channel. So be sure you're following along, and of course on illegalcurve.com. But yeah, I mean, I'm not terribly surprised that Scott Arniel got the job, that, that he handled the responsibilities when Rick Bowness was out. And the one thing I'm curious about, and the one thing we'll have to ask on Monday, Drew, is, was this a question to the players in their exit availabilities in terms of the relationship with the coach or assistant or the associate coach, knowing that this could be, and remember, Rick Bowness made the decision to retire, but it was a team option. So the team didn't necessarily bring him back. And I'm sure they wanted to find out from the players to get their sense as to what their feelings were with respect to Scott Arniel. And you've said it on the show, I think you said it last week, that an associate coach gets to be the good cop, gets to be the good guy, gets to be the good friend. You're not really the bad cop. So that's something that Scott Arniel will have to do. But I'm just saying that for me, I wonder, I have to imagine that they would have queried the players to find out their feelings with respect to Scott Arniel.
Well, you certainly consult, far and wide. You get opinions, you gather what people believe, and you don't necessarily listen to every player on the roster, but that's why you have your leadership core that likely will be able to speak truthfully and honestly to you about the individual in question. Look, we do. Scott Arniel, to me right now, is probably coming in actually a fairly reasonable situation, because the hiring, by and large, I don't think has been met with an overwhelming dose of positivity.
No.
Whether or not that's fair can be discussed at a later date and time. Everybody always wants the shiny new toy, and that's true, about all things, really, especially in sports. You always want the backup quarterback. You always want the backup goaltender. You always want the coach from outside the organization. And the truth is, anybody that tells you that they know how Scott Arniel's tenure is going to go is just not being honest. We don't know. Might he flame out like he did in Columbus? It's certainly possible. Might he exceed, expectations? Might he have learned so much from his tenure as a head coach and then the subsequent decade or so that he has spent as an assistant coach, and all of a sudden he becomes one of the better coaches in the league? Yeah, it's possible. The truth is, he's probably going to end up as a average coach. And I don't say that necessarily in a negative sense, because I think by and large, the vast majority of NHL head coaches are average. I just think that's the reality of the game. It's such a difficult job, and so much of what you can control, ultimately, once it gets out on the ice, you can't control it anymore. So it's motivating, and it's about, tying in with your players and making sure you're all pulling in the same direction, but you never know how it's going to turn out until you get down that road. So, people, tearing their hair out and throwing their arms up and saying, this is the worst thing that could have ever happened to the Winnipeg Jets, rein it in a bit. You don't know. And the people who are celebrating and taking to Portage and Maine and saying this is the best thing that could ever happen to the Winnipeg Jets, rein it in. You just don't know. So unfortunately, it is very much a wait and see. You have to hope that Scott Arniel has learned a ton from his time in Columbus. And that was so long ago that it would almost be, it's almost unfair to look back at that and say, yes, these past performance is going to dictate future results. That Columbus team wasn't very good. It didn't have goaltending. I think we had Ken Wiebe on, and Ken said that Columbus team actually was possession positive, which is sort of hard to believe given how bad they were ultimately on the wins and loss ledger. We don't know. It's Scott Arniel's job is to come in and maintain what was done the last couple of years by Rick Bowness and build upon it. And there's a lot of room to build. There's a lot of the ceiling. It should be, needs to be, reached by a number of stairs climbing up. You're not necessarily just climbing one story to get to where the Jets need to be. They're climbing 2 or 3 stories. But at the same time, I don't think that the floor should be terribly low because of the bones, pardon the pun, that Rick Bowness and his crew put in place over the last couple of years.
Well, and to that end, Drew, I'll read the quote from Rick Bowness, who is, of course, now joining the panel on Sportsnet for the 3rd round. And he was asked by Ron McLean yesterday, and he said, "I'm very, very happy for Scott. He has been a huge help for me over the last couple of years, and he's more than prepared for this job. He is the perfect guy to take over. He's going to continue to build what we've done for the last couple of years. Hopefully he can have more success in the playoffs than I did, but he is more than ready for this job. He is going to do a great job for the Winnipeg Jets." Now, they have former head coach that some people had faith in, some people didn't. But I mean, to me, the thing again, none of us know. Nobody knows what anyone is going to do. And with all due respect, I mean, you could say Gerard Gallant could have been a better option. Todd McClellan could have been a better option. Who else? Woodcroft could have been a better option. Maybe Todd Nelson. Again, it's all speculative. We don't know, as you just said, and we won't know until this is the reason why when a team looks like they're the Stanley Cup champions on day one of the regular season, we don't just say, well, forget about playing all the games. You've already anointed this team to be a Stanley Cup champion. So to me, I just don't think that it's fair to say that folks can't change and they can't adapt and they can't evolve. And that's the whole point of the game, is that you have to be able to. So I'm not going to judge him based on what he did in Columbus. I mean, look, Scott Billeck wrote an article for which he was accused of being towing the party line, but he wrote an article.
Folks, let me just interrupt quickly. Folks, there's not a grand conspiracy. There is no party line. We do not get talking points that we need to recite. Just for the record, what Scott did was he wrote an article where he went out and interviewed people that know Scott Arniel and have worked with Scott Arniel, and then he took those quotes and presented them to you, the audience, to read and react to in whatever manner you deem fit. That doesn't mean that he's, towing the party line. That means he's going and reporting and talking to people, which is what you want people to do. That's why we interview people on this show. It's written down in the newspaper as opposed to on video on YouTube. Doesn't make it any less valuable information.
Yeah, and look, I guess what I would say is that, this is like, sometimes people are experts, right? And I always laugh and I'm like, well, just because you know something doesn't mean the person beside you does. And that's the reason why you put this information out there. And look, Scott wrote an article and just spoke to former guys that Scott Arniel had worked on. Scott Billeck wrote the article, not Scott Arniel. Yeah. And he went and he spoke to former coaches. Again, I have no vested interest. I mean, I've talked to Scott Arniel. He's a nice enough guy. But like, if it's Scott Arniel, Gerard Gallant, or any other coach, it's all the same to us. We don't really, like I said, it doesn't make a difference one way or the other. I'm just saying I'm not ready to castigate and say a guy can't do the job because of X, Y, or Z. I mean, again, we'll see. We'll judge him based on what he does in the job. And I'm telling you, by game 20, game 30 of next season, we'll have opinions as to whether Scott Arniel is capable of doing this job or not. And so for now, you're just looking back at, the reaction. And I understand that fans, think it's a true North loyalty hire, and it's simply just, or it's done. I saw the NHL Network yesterday, their in-depth analysis in quotes was that, this is an opportunity to save some bucks, that they're not spending huge amounts of money on, because I mean, let's be real, head coaches now are going in the millions of dollars.
Sheldon Keefe cost the New Jersey Devils more than what Scott Arniel is going to cost the Winnipeg Jets.
Now, again, you don't try and, I don't think, scrimp on a head coach because you want to save a few, because again, it doesn't have any impact on your cap situation, obviously. But again, you want the guy who you think is going to be able to take your team, your organization, and get it to that next level. He obviously took the Manitoba Moose to a Calder Cup final back in, I think, was that 2009 against the Hershey Bears, appropriately, since we were talking about Todd Nelson. Mm-hmm. But again, there's some people that love Scott Arniel. There's some people like Mike Commodore who absolutely hate Scott Arniel and think it's a terrible hire for the Winnipeg Jets.
So in the interest of full disclosure, let me read the quote for the tweet from Mike Commodore. This was 13 hours ago, and everyone knows Mike Commodore is certainly not shy about expressing his opinions, but at the same time, it's an opinion of his. It doesn't mean it's gospel and everybody believes that. So there's some, there's an element to that. Mike Commodore, responding to the Darren Dreger's breaking news that the Jets have hired Scott Arniel, says, massive mistake by the Jets. Scott Arniel is a loser. He's been a loser his entire career. Got a chance years ago. His arrogance ruined everything. He spent the last 14 years with his nose up, bleep holes, and his lips. Swear. Okay, well, I mean, some of this is a little bit, it's a little bit blue. Anyways, that he does. Long story short, Mike Commodore doesn't like Scott Arniel. That's all fine and good. I'm confident in saying that probably Scott Arniel doesn't think much of Mike Commodore. Mm-hmm. But that just because what Mike Commodore says, again, he comes from it from a different lens, a different experience, and also an experience that happened, 15 years ago. I would certainly hope that Scott Arniel as a person has grown in the last 15 years. I think he himself would tell you, Dave, that his time as the head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets was a disaster. And a lot of that was probably his own doing. he picked a fight with Aaron Portzline, who at the time was really the only beat writer for the Blue Jackets, and he got off to a bad tenure in Columbus based on his own attitude and his own interaction with the local audience, with the local gatekeepers. So that was an error in Scott Arniel's judgment that I would assume he has learned from over the last 15 years. If he didn't, if he comes to the job with the same level of arrogance, then he probably won't be long for the job, because you can't be that kind of unabashed a-hole and really get away with it in 2024 at this point in time.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Drew. And we can't live. I don't think I'm the same person I was 10 years ago. I'm probably worse. Right. But the point is that, you have to think that, you had a job. He was in that position for about a year and a half. And then you think to yourself, okay, well, I lost that chance. I'm now back as an associate or an assistant coach in various organizations with the Rangers and the Capitals and obviously the Jets. And again, it seemed that he had a good impact. Now, we've talked about it, obviously, to start the show, is that there's a big difference between being an associate or an assistant than there is being a head. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what he's able to do. Was he in high demand? Probably not. And that's fine. Again, like I said, I don't know. Like it's just, there's so much. It's interesting because we put this out on Twitter, or we put this out on our various social media. Some people seem to be pleased with it. Some seem not so happy. Again, I'm on of the mindset, and I think a big factor will be his assistant coaches. The special teams really 5-on-5. I know the Jets the last couple of years have been consistent in that regard. Personnel we know are most likely going to stay the same, exception of Tyler Toffoli and Pierre LeBrun's article yesterday saying that he's going to be testing free agency. I'm like, that's not a big revelation based on his comments in the end of season media availability, or just a fit, to be honest with you.
Did he say that ship has sailed? Because if you ever hear Pierre LeBrun say that a player re-signing with another team is not possible and that ship has sailed, that means that player is about to re-sign with that team, just like he did last year with Commodore, with Hellebuyck and Scheifele.
Oh yeah, no, he didn't. He did not use those terms, Drew. Yeah. So, but anyways, so I think that it'll be very interesting to see what happens with this hockey club. But we'll hear the message from Scott Arniel. We'll hear from the horse's mouth on Monday, right?
You'll hear from him on Monday. We're actually going to also in the second hour of today's show, if you remember back into February, during the All-Star break, when we had our 15-year anniversary show, Scott Arniel was a guest on that show. So we're going to play some snippets from that in hour number 2 of this morning's shows, just to hear not necessarily him, addressing his chances as becoming a head coach, but just interesting to hear his philosophy and how he deals with players. And of course, he's dealing with those players in the associate head coach role as opposed to the head coach role. Good cop, bad cop that we've talked about. But nonetheless, you'll hear directly from the horse's mouth, Scott Arniel, in hour number 2 of this show as we replay that interview from earlier this year, from back in February when he was on the program.
And Drew, I like this point by Dr. Sad W. If he can adjust from the zero ability to incorporate, grow young talent, I'm fine. If it's the 80s mentality, old and big, then we're in trouble.
That's fair.
So look, I mean, Cole Perfetti, there's going to be an opportunity. You think they have to think there's an opportunity for him. We're not going to see the type of healthy scratches that we saw this season for the 2020 first rounder. Yep. Whether there's a spot for a Brad Lambert type in this lineup, we'll see. So that's the big question. Will those young players get that chance to grow under Scott Arniel? Mm-hmm. Again, that's a good question, and we'll see how he incorporates and trusts youth on this team. Because look, let's be realistic. Connor Hellebuyck, Mark Scheifele's extensions, which kick the 7-year extensions, which kick in next season. Like, this move isn't made because the Jets want to just be a playoff team and get playoff revenue from 1 round or 2 rounds. You did the deals with Hellebuyck and Scheifele because you want to be a Stanley Cup contender. Right. Now, you still need to make some adds, and we've talked about the right side of the D, of course, needing to be upgraded based on, again, even though they won the William Jennings, the exposure that they were, or how they were exposed, I should say, in the playoffs. is something that they're going to need to do. And then that's an adjustment, right? And that's, of course, going to be on the coaching staff, but also on the general manager in terms of what he does during the summer. So we'll see about that. And of course, we'll touch on that as we get closer to the draft, which is in about a month's time. And of course, free agency, which is in just over a month. So lots of exciting things, Drew. But yeah, I mean, again,
but to your point, though, he has to, I mean, Rick Bowness, did a great job in getting the Jets up to a floor. He elevated the floor. He taught them, showed them, cajoled them to playing the right way. And that was great during the regular season. And he did a great job with that. But Rick Bowness, as a head coach, like all human beings, had some blind spots. There were areas that he refused to, I'd say pivot from. Nikolai Ehlers' ice time, Cole Perfetti in late game situations, Cole Perfetti healthy scratch. There were just certain times when it seemed like Rick Bowness was a little bit stuck in his ways, or maybe sort of falling back into how things had been done previously in the NHL. We know that young players, as much as you want them to be ready and seasoned to step into the NHL, they aren't necessarily a fully cooked product anymore before they start. They might be 95% of the way there, and 5% they have to learn on the job. We're just seeing that so much nowadays, that the youth around the league is precocious. And with that precociousness, you have to adjust and deal with a little bit of some growing pains, because the reward outweighs the risk at times. I don't know that Rick Bowness could ever sort of get over that mental hurdle. Scott Arniel has to find a way to take what is going to be a very similar core, especially up front, and lift them higher. And the players themselves spoke about that at the end of season media availabilities, how they had a great regular season, but they need 5 or 10% more from everybody, and that's what the offseason is about. Well, the Jets need 5 or 10% more, maybe even more, from the coaching staff. It's not strictly on the players, it's on the coaching staff to be able to adapt better, incorporate new philosophies, incorporate new strategies. The Jets got badly outcoached in the series against Colorado.
Yep.
That can't happen again. How do we learn from that? How does the coaching staff learn from that? Whatever the coaching staff is specifically going to look like, we don't fully know. But, how is Scott Arniel going to lead the coaching staff so that what happened at the end of the year doesn't happen next year come playoff time if the Jets get there?
I think that's a fair point, Drew. And I think, again, that to me is why what we hear from Scott Arniel on Monday will be interesting to hear what his plan is, how he plans on, his philosophy, whether it's just a repeat of what Rick Bowness's philosophy was. And again, he was good when Rick Bowness had to step away and take that, leave of absence when Judy was dealing with her health issues, or when Rick Bowness himself was dealing with his health issues. That second one wasn't quite as good as the first one, but
right.
The point is that he was, hold on one second. Sorry. I got a message from Kelly. So
Kelly Moore of CJOB set to join us in a couple minutes time, unless he's messaging and saying he's not coming.
No. He's asking for the link with the email, which I sent him yesterday, but I'll send it to him again.
Okay, there you go. So Dave, you can work on that.
You finish off my thought or create another one.
Let's see if I know what your thought was. That in and of itself will be the difficult part. But that's where and that's where all the uncertainty comes from. That's what I was talking about before. Nobody knows what Scott Arniel is going to be as a head coach. Nobody knows for sure. Are the players going to have that same level of buy-in, or are they going to revert back to some previous methods of going about their business that aren't long-term successful? That's the unknown, and that you'll never know until you get down to brass tacks time, when the games actually matter on the ice. Does Scott Arniel have that same level of respect and gravitas that Rick Bowness has, or does he come in and maybe the players decide that they're going to not necessarily adhere to his message? You hope that's not the case. I would think that True North would also know that's not the case before agreeing to hire him based on the exit interview comments and based on what the leadership for the group for the Jets likely told Mark Chipman and Kevin Cheveldayoff. They had to give probably a vote of confidence for Scott Arniel getting this job. And so
Drew,
go ahead.
Just to quickly finish off, I think Kelly the stuff, so he'll be joining us in a few minutes, so we'll have to break soon. But just to finish the thought off is that to me is what I think is ultimately the deciding factor here. Sure, the coaching staff, the ownership, the general managers felt confident in Scott Arniel, but I have to think we will ask this question on Monday of GM Kevin Cheveldayoff, who's speaking alongside Scott Arniel. I have to think they took the temperature of the team, and the team said it felt confident in Scott Arniel as coach. And again, you can say, like, we'll find out. But if that's the case, if the players feel confident that they can win, I mean, again, like that impact. I mean, look, Rick Bowness, we saw it in the playoffs. He didn't adjust. He didn't evolve the way he needed to. Like, even like I said, when you watch the timeouts and he's on the bench and the team's just kind of sitting there, Bednar is got his whole group around him. And there's, 6 to 8 guys, and they're defending a 2-goal lead. And Bowness wasn't. So to me, that wasn't a great sign for him. And again, he did win 52 games this season. So they didn't exactly fall ass backwards into the playoffs. And so we'll see if Scott Arniel can build on what they were able to achieve this season.
That will be the great question that only time will tell what the answer will be. Kelly Moore of CJOB Sports is up next. Hour number 2. Reminder, we're going to play some of our previous interview with Scott Arniel from this past February. Don't go anywhere. It's a Saturday morning. Drew Mandel, Dave Manouk. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
It's all over, folks, and the run has come to an end.
You'll be so far away.
A Canadian team hasn't won the Cup in over 30 years.
And the Cup will stay south of the border.
Maybe it's time we try something different. This playoff season, let's cheer with the fans we've always cheered against. Team up for the Cup at Boston Pizza.
Hey Winnipeg, Wendell Clark here. I'm coming out there May 28th for the Rady JCC dinner. Myself, Dougie Gilmore, Grant Fuhr. Some good storytelling about Winnipeg beating us up when we used to come there. See you there.
We did it again!
You're on fire, man.
There's power in a handshake after a great game or great deal. It shows professionalism and respect. Two qualities Zappia Group Realty take pride in. You don't build a business where 95% of your clients are referred by others without honesty, integrity, and total dedication to client satisfaction. To sell your home for more in less time, shake hands with Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Get started at zappiagroup.com.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Manouk. Really looking forward to Tuesday night. Wendell Clark, Grant Fuhr, Dougie Gilmore, they're all going to be in Winnipeg at the Rady JCC dinner. Dave and I will be there. Looking forward to a great time. I think you can still get some tickets. RadyJCC.com. If you're a last-minute purchaser, tell them that you want to go and see Doug and Wendell and Grant Fuhr talk about those great 80s, 90s hockey. That'll be a fun time Tuesday night for the Rady JCC Sports dinner. dinner. Our good friend Kelly Moore of CJOB 680 joins us on the program. Kelly, good morning. Nice to see you. How are things? I hope you're staying dry.
Yes, I am staying dry. Had the chance to work the Sea Bears broadcast last night.
What a game.
We're doing some selected games on CJOB, and wow, talk about a dramatic finish. I mean, they could not write that any better. I don't know who came up with that idea for the target score, but it's a winner.
It's a university professor. His last name is Elam. I don't know what
to say Mindell for a second.
No. I can promise you there are no Mindells who ever achieved university professor status.
Okay.
We don't have doctor in front of our name, even if it's chiropractor, dentist, or medical doctor, PhD doctor. We don't have doctor in front of our names.
Yeah.
But it's a university professor. I want to say in Iowa or somewhere like that, who came up with it, and it was initially known as the Elam ending, and that's sort of it's exciting beyond belief, isn't it?
Yeah, great. You learn something new every day, and I'm sure. Have you guys talked about that at all on the show yet this morning, or
the game? Not
yet.
Yeah. Well, just the Coles Notes version. The target score is 107. The game's tied 106. Scarborough gets a couple of free throws. That great crowd of over 9,100 that really were the sixth player in that game last night booed the Scarborough player into some form of distraction, because up until that time, I want to say they were 23 for 27 from the foul line. All he had to do was get one, missed both. And then, of course, the great ending, Teddy Allen, who had a superb game, dishes off to veteran Alex Campbell in the left corner. He is 1 point away from becoming the first Canadian to score 1,000 points in the CEBL. Splash from 3-point land.
And the crowd went berserk.
Kelly, I was going to say that crowd, and again, I wasn't there, but I was watching. I saw some of the highlights that were. Right. It was incredible, and it sounded like there were 20,000 in that building, not 9, just over 9.
Yeah. No, 9,116, and man, I'll tell you, do they enjoy themselves? Congratulations. I know this is a hockey show, but I had to get that in because it was just absolutely superb how that played out last night.
It is a fun time. They've been. I took my son to a game last year, and we had a great time. And looks like it's going to be much the same this year for the Sea Bears. And of course, their game's being broadcast on 680 CJOB. So if you're driving around,
select games.
Sorry, yes, select games. Want to make that clear? Yes. So you can always tune in if you can't make it down to the arena for those games. Kelly, obviously the big news of the day, the big news of the week, going to the on ice version of the game that's played in downtown Winnipeg. Is the announcement that Scott Arniel is officially now the 4th Winnipeg Jets head coach. I guess you're not a surprise, but are you at all surprised that the process took as long as it did to get to this point?
Not really, because you have, and I don't know exactly all who Kevin Cheveldayoff spoke with, but you have guys that I think would be on the radar that are involved in other things right now. You've got Dean Evison and Jay Woodcroft overseas with Team Canada at the World Championship in Prague. You have Todd Nelson, who I would think, deserved a conversation to do right by the process. He's still involved in the AHL playoffs with the Hershey Bears. I'm guessing that there was a conversation with Craig Berube, and that wasn't really settled until the week before. They made the official announcement on Tuesday, but it came out on Friday afternoon. Kind of what the Jets did yesterday. You have the news come out late in the afternoon on Friday when everybody's got the weekend on their mind, and now we'll mull over it for a few days, and then maybe this is the right way to go about it, because it's such a passionate fan base. You might not have to do that in other areas, but I think maybe they've talked about it amongst themselves, and that might be the best way to do it. So I don't think that they carried the process too long. I know John Shannon, our hockey expert and insider, he felt that what took so long. Well, I guess it all depends whether you're an impulse buyer or whether you're, a conservative buyer. Now, the reason I don't think it took too long, when my wife and I are buying things, we test out other elements just to make sure. We want to feel comfortable that we did make the right decision. We almost always come back to what was our original first choice.
It's called doing your due diligence.
Yeah. Well, my wife might refer to it more as procrastinating, but
potato.
Exactly. Yeah. So I if I could use it, in the vernacular of say buying a car, you're making a substantial investment. You've got your eye on a particular make and model, but you want to also make sure that when you make that choice, that you're doing it with complete certainty. So I'm not going to be critical of the way that the Jets did it, because I don't think there was any rigid timeline that had to be met on this.
So Kelly, the reaction, as you talk about, is has been significant, whether both positive and negative. How do you judge something like this? Because from my perspective, we haven't even seen Scott Arniel other than when he took over for Rick, when Judy was sick, or when Rick himself had health issues. But we don't know what he's been like as a head coach. He was last a head coach in Columbus over a decade ago.
Right.
So from your perspective, I mean, again, it's like I was saying at the outset of the show, it's like judging an NHL season and saying, well, this team's going to win the Stanley Cup, so what's the point of playing? We don't even know what he's going to be like in his second tenure, his second opportunity. So from your perspective, all of this kind of hand-wringing that we're seeing, or outright celebrating, but mostly it's hand-wringing from what I'm seeing on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at what point, do you have to say, like, listen, like, we'll judge him 30 games in, 40 games in? That's the thing, as opposed to this instant reaction to something that we don't even know what the outcome is going to look like.
Right. So maybe it's because I'm of a vintage age, but I would just, the advice I would always give is just calm down.
Breathe.
Let's see how this plays out. I mean, look at all of the angst and the hand-wringing, to use one of your terms, Dave, that took place over the course of last summer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why haven't they traded Connor Hellebuck yet? Why haven't they shipped Mark Scheifele out of town? Those guys aren't re-signing. They're not coming back. The window's closed. And then look how that played out. The year before, coming off the non-playoff season, and because the Jets didn't get Barry Trotz, it was going to be an unmitigated disaster because they had to, quote, settle for Rick Bowness. And that turned out pretty well for them. I mean, the end of it wasn't great as far as what happened against Vegas in the playoffs, and even further in before that, in the second half of the season. But it certainly wasn't the unmitigated disaster that was being portrayed. So I will never, ever tell anybody how to feel or how to express an opinion. But if anybody was to ask for it, and you're asking for my take on it,
I am.
I'm just saying, let's calm down. Scott Arniel is a career coach after a pretty distinguished playing career. And, I mean, you can debate till the cows come home whether he was ready for that first NHL head coaching gig, back from 2010 through midway through the 11-12 season. I think for the first little while, felt very let down that he was only given that amount of time to try to get things changed around in Columbus. And I don't think he should take it too personally. Look at the list of Columbus coaches. It has been a literal carousel there.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a better coach for it. He'll certainly know the signs. And he did go 15-8-3 as a fill-in head coach. When Rick had COVID in that first season, and then you mentioned Judy with the seizure, and then Rick on that road trip that started off very well with the win at Madison Square Garden over the Rangers.
Yeah.
And they won in Columbus the game before that. So the road trip started off very well at the tail end. well, I guess the New Jersey and Islanders games were not good at all, but I thought they deserved a better fate than 3-0 against Washington. So, 15-8-3, that's 26 games. That's roughly a third of a season. So it's not an insignificant sample size, but I think, we've got at least a little bit of a feel for how he wants to coach. Now, a lot of that was trying to follow the template rather that Rick had established in training camp, and this season in particular. But what I also like is the way that the team was able to play, even in the start of the 22-23 season. There was no way the Jets had any chance to prepare for Rick testing positive for COVID.
Right.
The day of the season opener against the Rangers, and the hockey club went 5-3-1 in those 9 games. So I think that there's at least a little bit of a sample size, if you will, to see what we can expect. And I guess the other part of here's how I look at it anyway. This was a pretty good year. This was a hockey club that did have 110 points. And I know, we are still smarting over how that first round series played out against Colorado. But how much do you really want to change of that from the regular season? Is there a need for change? Now, the other part of this is, and what I'm going to be really interested to hear on Monday at the news conference, guys, is what do they plan on doing with the rest of the staff? I don't know what the contract situations are for Brad Lauer or for Marty Johnston. I don't think you mess around with Wade Flaherty. Connor Hellebuck has made it very clear, that he and Wade have a great thing going, and who could argue with that? But whether you retain Brad and Marty, and then I think you're going to add a third person, and this is the other part of this too, this interview process. Say some of the names out there don't get a head coaching job. Might they be interested in an associate coaching job with the Winnipeg Jets? And can they bring some fresh ideas for the power play and the penalty kill? Because to me, those are the two things with this coaching staff going forward. How are you going to fix those parts of the game?
Well, that was gonna lead me to my next question, Kelly. Kelly Moore, Jets game night host on 680 CGLB, is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I was going to ask you, you're Scott Arniel. You finish with the pomp and circumstance on Monday, and then get down to work time. What's priority number one for Scott Arniel as the Winnipeg Jets head coach? There's not a ton. I mean, you have a pretty good idea of what your roster is going to look like, especially up front. Of course, the Nikolai Ehlers question is, lingering, and we'll talk about that coming up. But Scott Arniel, day one, hour one, what's job one from your perspective?
I think, and it has to be done the right way. But and again, this is strictly my opinion. I have no idea if Scott's going to do this, but I think, what you want to do is you want to set the tempo right from day one of training camp. And so you don't want to completely disregard the regular season, but I think right from day one, you want to set the foundation for becoming that team that can handle playoff pressure, that can handle playoff adversity, that's ready to bring their game up several levels once you get through a regular season, no matter how successful or how challenging it's been. So with the players who are going to be returning, and Drew, the only I might quibble with you a little bit. I don't know that the lineup is entirely set, because we don't know if Dylan DeMello is going to be re-signed and return as a partner for Josh Morrissey. So
up front is what I was speaking about.
Yeah, up front, but even that second line right now, if it is indeed accurate, and you guys might have better sources than I do, but I haven't been able to get anyone to say that the Winnipeg Jets are interested in moving on from Nikolai Ehlers.
Right.
So I know
that's
what's out
there. That's more of of people, I think, reading the tea leaves than anybody necessarily saying he's being shopped left, right, and center.
Right. Yeah. So I always paraphrase that with if Nikolai Ehlers, is not going to be here, because
allegedly.
I don't know that with certainty. I would have to think that they will prioritize re-signing Sean Monahan. But again, we don't know for sure whether it's money or whether it's term, if that can work. So, and I don't think Tyler Toffoli's coming back.
No.
And I think that would probably be mutual. You know, that didn't work out, I don't think, as well as anybody wanted to. So right there, you know, you've got an entire second line that you're going to have to potentially rebuild. You know, from that aspect, I think, you know, Scott has to take a look at it from, okay, I'm going to deal with the players that I have right now. I'm sure he's in conversation with Kevin Cheveldayoff already on what the wish list would be, and plot a strategy there. But I really do believe that they have to have a mindset, especially from the leadership group, but it's got to be complete buy-in, that they have a better understanding now of what it's going to take to be successful in the playoffs. You can, I mean, look at Vancouver. I think they can accept the fact that maybe they ran out of gas a little bit. We don't know how you know, some of the players that they depend on, what the injury status was for them. But you pushed Edmonton to 7 games. You never quit. So I think, as disappointing as the end of the series is for Vancouver, that's something you can you know, tend to live with. They probably will come to regret how they didn't play nearly as well as they needed to in Game 6, and that allowed Edmonton the momentum. But again, those are lessons learned. Don't give the opponent the chance, you know, to get feeling good about themselves.
Killer instinct. I mean, it's hard to learn killer instinct. We see that over and over again in sports.
So you don't want to make it overbearing. Right. I still remember, you know, the last year of Winnipeg Jets 1.0 in 95-96, and because the Detroit Red Wings won the Stanley Cup a couple of years later, but they had a wonderful season. What do they have? 122 points or something like
crazy.
that.
They were so good.
Incredible year. They never enjoyed a second of it because they were fixated on winning the Stanley Cup, and then wound up not winning it anyway that year. So I think, you know, that's the balance that you've got to find, is, you know, getting through the grind of the regular season, but establishing the template for what you're going to need to be successful come the playoffs. I think that's going to be a real mandate of the coaching staff. At least that's what I would foresee.
Now, Kelly, I'm going to ask you a question which you can't actually know the answer for, so I'm going to ask you to speculate
a little bit. Hang on, I'm going to have a sip of coffee, and it's just coffee.
Okay, there you go.
We'll give you time if you need to go add some whiskey or something based on Dave's preamble there.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna I might take the opportunity to call a friend. So
yeah, you can do that if you need to. But no, it was one thing Drew and I were talking about, and when the Jets came to this decision about Scott Arniel, my conjecture, and we can turn this speculation into a question for Kevin Cheveldayoff on Monday, is I have to think he vetted this idea of Scott Arniel with the players during the exit interviews and had to have tested the metal. So do you think that seems plausible, that he would have gone to the players in this room, especially the leadership, and said, you know, Rick Bowness has a team option. We don't know if he's coming back. He may choose to retire. How do you feel about Scott Arniel? I have to think that this team overwhelmingly, the players, would have said they were in favor. And that's part of the reason why he's coming back as the head coach of the Winnipeg Jets.
I honestly don't think that those conversations would have taken place.
Okay.
I think as a general manager, you know, you can, without asking that kind of question directly, I think you can, you know, kind of read the room as to, you know, when you ask the player, you know, do you feel you were given every chance to be the best version of yourself? You know, do you feel like you were given a proper role on this hockey club? And I think there you can ascertain, you know, whether maybe you need to change some of the direction at the top. But again, you know, and in this year in particular, what was it? I'm doing some quick math here. It was 18 games, you know, where they were able to get a firsthand look at how the club played when Scott was in charge. And you know, and what the mood was like at that time, because I think, you know, for sure at some point I'm thinking that because I know we were all talking about it in the media, especially after Judy Bowness suffered that seizure. You know, what's Rick going to do with a life decision at the end of this year? So I'm sure that the hockey club was preparing for it somewhat. I think though, Dave, that if the players had perhaps, like we've heard from the exit interviews in Seattle this past season with Dave Haxtell, and what we heard, the year before with the exit interviews with Daryl Sutter in Calgary, I think then maybe there would have been the scenario for that, but
they could probably fire a coach. They might not be able to necessarily hire a coach.
Exactly. Yeah. Like Dave, and I'll tell you what, I will say this to the listening audience. This man has an incredible work ethic. I've got nothing but utter respect, and I haven't been paid a penny for that. For Dave
Please don't give him praise. His ego runs amok. It's terrible for me after that.
You know what? Good. Deal with it, Drew. Deal with it. But Dave, you see what the hockey club is like, and we're watching them at practice, and it's not like the players are, trying to find a quiet corner to get away from Scott Arniel if he's talking to them, or if they're, having conversations and that sort of thing. You don't get any of that kind of sense at all.
No, and Kelly, to that point, it was funny because I was going through photos that our photographer had taken of practice, looking for new. Scott Arniel went to add to our library for illegalcurve.com. And it was funny because I had pictures of him talking to everybody.
Yeah.
Perfetti, Dylan DeMello, Brendan Dillon. Like, it wasn't just the defenseman, it was the entirety of the team. There was a multitude of options. So it just confirms your point, is that he's a guy who really engages. And again, when you're the associate, you get to be the good cop. You get to be the friend.
But he also had a chance, though, and the players have also had a chance to see him as the
head coach,
quintessential bad cop too.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Kelly
Moore. I was just going to say, here's the other. I'm going to put the question on you guys now.
Oh, boy.
Okay? So, if of all the names that were out there, who would the Winnipeg Jets be missing the boat on by making this decision? Who would be a better fit as a head coach with the people who are available out there, that you would have preferred to see behind the bench as opposed to Scott Arniel?
Well, it's as we talked about in hour number one, when we started the show, everybody always wants the backup quarterback.
Yeah.
Everybody always wants the backup goaltender. Everybody else wants the coach that's not Nick your Patan. Own coach.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's the grass is always greener, and there's a reason why that adage exists. I mean, the truth is nobody knows. It might work. It might not work. Is Scott Arniel, has he learned from Columbus? I would absolutely assume that he has learned a lot from Columbus.
Sure. Yeah.
What I'm curious about, and what I wanted to ask you about, Kelly, is, we see the younger players making an impact all throughout the league. And here in Winnipeg, the Jets have been reticent to really use a younger player until they're maybe 100% ready to step in. Whereas a lot of other teams are maybe taking 95% of that youth, living with 5% that you might not necessarily love. But that was always sort of a blind spot for Rick Bowness, or the reported blind spot, that he didn't love the youthful players like a lot of coaches do. With Scott Arniel's history in the AHL, do you think that he's going to be more, maybe more lenient or more willing to live with a young player's mistake than Rick Bowness was?
Well, I think it all depends on where you are in the evolution of your hockey club too, guys.
Sure.
Like, look at the teams, and let's not go with the 16 teams in the first round, because that would take forever. But even if you go through the 8 teams that made it to the second round, other than the Dallas Stars with Logan Stankoven and to a certain degree Wyatt Johnston, and Thomas Harley. Pete DeBoer talked about him the other day, where Pete's first year, which was just last season, Thomas Harley couldn't make the hockey club because he couldn't defend well enough. And so the great strides that he has made now. So other than Dallas, who else is playing all of these young players, other than teams that are trying to get to become a genuine contender? So I think part of that enters into the equation as well. I think, trust me, if the Winnipeg Jets want desperately for Cole Perfetti to be able to, increase the level of his game to the point where you don't have to make deals at the deadline to boost your top 6 forward ranks because you've got a good young forward who can take care of that on a ELC. And to me, that is, and this is where I agree with you guys, or at least with the sentiment I think that's attached to the question, that if you're going to be successful, not just for this year, but also for an extended period, then I think, you've got to be able to have some of that talent on entry-level contracts where you're getting triple and quadruple the bang for your buck.
Well, and Kelly, I the truth is, we don't know, right? We don't know these things. Like, look, Parker Ford was a guy who was one of the last cuts at training camp last year. And
right.
He went down. He had a good start, playing on Jeff Malott and Brad Lambert aligned with them. Then, of course, moving to play with Christian Reichel and Jeffrey Viel, where he really excelled. And he, similar to what Brandon Tanev did, and of course it's coincidental because they both went to Providence College, but he really developed. He really got that opportunity to develop. Brad Lambert got a really good opportunity. I think that what folks have to realize is, you have to earn it. You can't just be handed these things. Like Logan Stankoven was the best player in the AHL, and he got promoted accordingly. So, it's not like
only Dave, because of an injury, I think, to Dadonov, wasn't it?
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. You're right. And so the point is that he got that opportunity because of an injury, not because the team was he was dominating the AHL. Dallas was happy. Texas was happy. And so he got that opportunity. And again, Ville Heinola, we know what he was going to do last year, but of course, injury in the last game against that last preseason game against Ottawa, he'll come back hungry. But my point is that, it's not up to the team to make these opportunities. It's up for the players to force your hand and to say, you're not going to be able to not keep me on your roster this year, even if I'm waiver exempt like Brad Lambert. And again, you're right. There's so much uncertainty, but I just think that, the players will create those opportunities if they can force the hand of the team. And again, Ville Heinola was going to force this team. If he doesn't get injured in game 6 of the preseason, he forces his team to make some sort of uncomfortable decision because they had to become roster compliant. He was the only one who was waiver exempt, but it sounded like Rick Bowness, we know Kevin Cheveldayoff seems to want him. So I'm just saying there could be similar decisions this year, barring injury, of course, there where you see young guys force the hand. I don't think it's going to be Nikita Chibrikov per se, but could Brad Lambert do it? For sure. So that's all I'm saying. I think there are opportunities for guys who are on those ELCs to make a splash.
Absolutely. And don't think for 1 minute, especially management, but also coaches. They want to see the young players be able to get into the lineup, because then it creates more of a competitive edge within the playing ranks. But the other part of that too, guys, and when we're with the idea of what the feedback is from the room, from the players, especially from the leadership group, if they don't see those young guys as being valid contributors, to what the eventual goal is, then I think that affects your room a little bit. So that goes right to your point that, you do want to see the youth of the hockey club get the chance. But boy, I'll tell you what, they've got to prove that they can be able to contribute. And it doesn't just have to be goals and assists. It has to be playing the right way. And, I think, and I agree with you guys, I think if you were going to pin anybody down and say, okay, from what they have on the farm right now, I think the names of Lambert and Heinola would be the first that come to the fore. And how the Jets go about retaining their pending UFAs, how they go about July the 1st, which is always a crapshoot because not to belabor the point, but Winnipeg is not first on any pending free agents list. They have to do things a little bit differently to get that kind of talent. But I still think we'll see what management feels about some of those young guys by how they go about business over the next. Geez, I mean, it's only like 5 weeks away.
5 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I mean, isn't like Canada Day a Saturday this year, or is it a Sunday? I mean, it's a Saturday, so it's exactly 5 weeks from today, basically, which is, or it's actually a Monday.
Works out well for the illegal curve.
It works out very well. That'll be a very exciting lead up to everything.
Yeah.
But it isn't that far away. To your point, Kelly, it's right around the corner, which will lead me to, I guess, I think, probably the final question. all this talk about Scott Arniel, how he's going to coach this team, how he's going to incorporate players, how he's going to sort of take this team to the next level. If the Jets don't retool on their back end, isn't he still sort of doing it with one hand tied behind his back, given the free agents that are on the back end, given the way the defense was exposed a little bit against Colorado in that series? And really, the Jets have that blueprint for regular season success. How do they translate that into postseason success now?
Yeah, and that'll certainly be something that they have to work on, I guess. Well, first off, you've got two pieces of your top four whose futures are in question, because we don't, I would think that it's a great fit with them and Dylan DeMello. Dave, you know me, how I feel about Brendan Dillon.
Yeah.
I absolutely, I am such a huge fan of how that man goes about his business on and off the ice. But if his camp is looking for something in the 3 to 4 year range, I don't know if you can do that, with a player who's going to be 34 early into next season. So, that father time might be the issue there. That might be the opening for Ville Heinola or possibly Logan Stanley. And I know there's been a lot of talk about buy this guy out, buy that guy out. I don't think it makes any sense whatsoever to buy out Neil Pionk unless you have 100% certainty on what you're going to do to replace him. Now, in my opinion, I think, if again, with the idea of making the defense better, I really do think that you've got to give Dylan Samberg a chance to play top four on a regular basis. He's ready for it. He might not be able to contribute as much offensively as you would like, but I think he can get close to the numbers that a guy like Brendan Dillon contributed.
That's just
so whether it's Dylan Samberg and Neil Pionk as your secondary pairing, if you're able to get Dylan DeMello back under contract to play with Josh Morrissey, or and this is where the tricky part comes in. There's some pretty decent right shot defensemen that are going to be going to the market, and I don't know that all of them can be retained by their hockey clubs. I mean, I don't know, maybe Bill Zito will be able to weave the same kind of magic that Kelly McCrimmon does in Vegas to keep Brandon Montour. But right now, because for sure, you think they want to re-sign a 50-goal scorer in Sam Reinhart. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out there. You've got Brett Pesce in Carolina. And I'm just tossing out a couple of names. There are more. Matt Roy from Los Angeles is another right shot defenseman that I think would probably blend in very well.
Sean Walker.
Well, Chris Tanev is an interesting case there, Dave, because again, you're talking about a guy that's 34 years old.
Yeah.
And do you want to put yourself in the situation where you become in peril of aging out? You already have long-term contracts committed to Connor Hellebuck and Mark Scheifele that are going to take them well into their 30s.
Yeah.
Nino Niederreiter is on a shorter type deal that is going to take him well into his 30s. The next deals for Josh Morrissey and Adam Lowry, and it kind of goes on. So this is where I think training camp becomes interesting this year, because young players are going to be given every opportunity whatsoever to make their mark. It's just a matter of whether they can. But to get back to the original point of retooling the defense, there's all we know right now is that Josh Morrissey, Dylan Samberg, Neil Pionk, Nate Schmidt, and Logan Stanley, and Ville Heinola are going to be part of that rotation. So they're going to have to either make some retentions, or they're going to have to make some additions, whether that's maybe via the Nikolai Ehlers scenario that everybody's talking about, or perhaps you can make a deal at the draft. With some teams that just don't see their way towards being able to afford everybody. So it'll be interesting to see how the Jets go about that. But you guys are right. That blue line has to be able to play a little bit differently, but let's not let the forwards off the hook either. It's still a 5-man game, and the forwards had as much responsibility with the defensive breakdowns against Colorado as the defense did.
No question about it. It'll be a fascinating offseason. Monday morning, the press conference to introduce Scott Arniel as the next Winnipeg Jets head coach. Complete coverage of that, of course, on 680 CJOB. Kelly Moore, our guest, is the Jets game night host on that fine radio station. Kelly, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time, your insight, your analysis as always, and we'll do it again real soon.
Absolutely. I just wish I was able to be on the deck again.
But, you can go on the deck. You just need a rain poncho a little bit.
Yeah, you guys might not be old enough, but I was thinking of playing a little Rankin Family 40 Days and 40 Nights in the background because it kind of feels like we're getting flooded out right now.
Yes. Hopefully the basement stays dry. That's the important part for everybody.
Amen to that. There's amen to that.
That's right. There's no sweeter sound than the sound of the sump pump running right now.
Okay, well, have a good
Kelly,
rest of the show, fellas. And as always, thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it, Kelly. Take care. Thanks so much. There he goes. Kelly Moore joining us this morning.
What a voice.
Oh, it's iconic.
Kelly Moore, Dennis Bayak, and I'm not going in any particular order. Kelly Moore, Dennis Bayak, and Kurt Keelback. I mean, those are, we got to give Paulie Edmonds also a shout out because
always going to join us next week.
I got to say, I love Paulie's calls too, but Tim, if you're going for your childhood, the voices of your childhood, Kelly Moore and Kurt Keelback for me are Don Whitman too, I guess, of course, but locally we'll say those two guys are iconic voices.
No question about it. Our good friend Paulie Edmonds is going to join us next week, and I was in touch with Dan Robertson. He's going to join us in June as well. So a whole slew of Jets broadcasters making their way through the program over the next few weeks and months and so forth. Much more to come. Saturday morning, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We'll play some of that old interview we did with Scott Arniel from February coming up next on the show. Don't go anywhere. Drew Mandel, Dave Manouk with you. It is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouthguard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouthguard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
It's all over, folks, and the run has come to an end.
You've been so far away.
A Canadian team hasn't won the Cup in over 30 years.
And the Cup will stay south of the border.
Maybe it's time we try something different. This playoff season, let's cheer with the fans we've always cheered against. Team up for the Cup at Boston Pizza.
Hey Winnipeg, Wendell Clark here. I'm coming out there May 28th for the Rady JCC dinner. Myself, Dougie Gilmore, Grant Fuhr. Some good storytelling about Winnipeg beating us up when we used to come there. See you there.
We did it again!
You're on fire, man.
There's power in a handshake. After a great game or great deal, it shows professionalism and respect. Two qualities Zappia Group Realty take pride in. You don't build a business where 95% of your clients are referred by others without honesty, integrity, and total dedication to client satisfaction. To sell your home for more in less time, shake hands with Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Get started at zappiagroup.com.
And we're back, except the we is I, because for some reason we've lost Drew Mandel.
And my computer just suffered some sort of complete nuclear meltdown. Like just commercials were rolling along, everything was going normal. I was setting up the video to bring in the Scott Arniel interview from February, and then all of a sudden it's just black.
I know.
Like, that's not good.
I'm like watching you, and I was like, all of a sudden you just popped off. I was like, and the commercial break ends. I'm like, all right, well, it looks like we're going for the Dave Minuk experience, which would have meant me just talking about the Manitoba Moose. But instead, we'll continue with what you're doing. You want to welcome everyone back? Do you want me to welcome everyone back?
You can welcome everyone back. I just
all right, welcome back. This is the second hour of the Legal Curve Hockey Show. I'm Dave Minuk. He's Drew Mandel, as he's away from the show for this week, not suspended for crumbs, despite what Drew may have told you earlier in the first hour.
It's entirely plausible that he would be suspended for crumbing your house.
That is true. That is true. Crumbing my house is definitely something I would expect Ezzy to do. Our thanks to Kelly Moore for jumping on and joining us for the last 30 minutes or so for his insight into what the big hiring, the big news from Winnipeg land this Friday with the Jets announced the hiring of Scott Arniel. And look, I know folks are concerned about maintaining the status quo. And look, the truth is, even despite the fact that the Jets had a good regular season, they didn't do well in the playoffs. They haven't done well in the playoffs in back-to-back years. One of the things Rick Bowness acknowledged in his comments last night, Drew, on the Sportsnet broadcast, was the fact that this is a team that needed to do better in the playoffs. He didn't get them to that place. So this is something that the Jets are going to have to improve. There's no excuses. And folks are right. The personnel has to change. The defense wasn't good last year. Again, they won the Jennings. So it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my face to say you won the Jennings by playing a structure that worked and limited goals. But, again, the D got exposed when it counted.
Are you built for April? Are you built for April? Are you built for May? Right. That's the question. And, the Jets were a great regular season team and they don't get anything. That's not nothing. That is something. There's a lot of teams, 16 of them, that didn't even make it to the Stanley Cup playoffs. And now the Jets made it there and have made it there for the last 2 years, but they've plateaued when they've got there. So the question is, and Scott Arniel's job as the Jets head coach is to figure out a way so that they no longer plateau come playoff time. Yes, you win the regular season. Yes, you're a playoff team. Yes, you made it this past year into the playoffs relatively easily with room to spare. But now how do you lift that ceiling? How do you increase that? How do you make it so that you're not fodder for better playoff teams? And that's easier said than done. I mean, Rick Bowness did a very good job getting the Jets to that point. But now it's incumbent on the players themselves and the head coach, Scott Arniel, to find out how that ceiling gets elevated. How does that ceiling that the Jets can strive for improve and increase? And it's not going to be easy because the players themselves are largely going to be the guts of the team are largely going to be the same. So are you getting 5 to 10% improvement from all the players on your roster? Well, that would be great, but that's also not necessarily realistic. But from behind the bench, is Scott Arniel going to do a 10% better job than Rick Bowness did? And that's no disrespect to Rick. That's what he needs to do. He's not going to, I don't think, reinvent the wheel here. I don't think he's going to take the past 2 years, the structure and the foundation that was built, rip it up and start anew. But he's going to have to increase it and build it up and make it more robust than it currently is. And that's going to be a difficult challenge, I think. But, it's not to say that he can't do it, but it's going to be something that's not easily done. It's easy, not easy, but it's, half the teams make it to the first round of the playoffs. Half the teams in the league. A quarter of the teams in the league make it to the second round. And then it goes further and further. It gets harder and harder, and your odds get lower and lower, beyond that. That's the goal. How do you become a second round team? How do you become a third round team? Because that's where the Jets need to get to. As we know, the last 2 years, they've been a first round team. We mentioned Scott Arniel joined us on the show back in February. Lord, hopefully this will work. This is parts of our interview with Scott Arniel from back in February. It starts with Ezzy asking him about stepping in for Rick Bowness when Judy had suffered the seizure, and Rick was out of the role as Jets head coach. That's the question Ezzy has just posed. Here's what Scott Arniel had to say.
This year was a little bit different than last year. Rick had, kind of was out
buffering
for a game here and a game there. And, it was a little bit different in the sense that, you knew he was going to be back, whether it was the next game or the next day. This was a little bit different. There was some uncertainty to this. And so, it was really a little bit different. In the end of the day, it was great to get back in and kind of, be the head guy and all that. But at the end of the day, this is still Rick's team, and it was going to be, and we knew that, hopefully prayed and hoped that everything was going to go well with Judy, and it did. And we weren't sure if that was going to be 2 weeks, 2 months. We didn't know how long it was going to last. So we had, obviously the players were outstanding. They were so professional. They cared so much. They wanted to make sure that they didn't let Rick down. And, amongst us all, Lauer, Marty Johnson, we all kind of had our work to do, and, we got it done, and we kept that sort of the ship afloat while Rick was away.
You've got a long history here in Winnipeg, second-round pick of the Jets back in 1981, a player, of course, with the Jets for, I think, 4.5 seasons. Then you came back, played for the Moose, then you were a coach for the Moose. So what's it like being here in the city for this long, and what have you noticed the second time around that you didn't maybe appreciate the first time?
You know what? Yeah, I mean, this is my second home. I mean, actually, it's funny because I've been away from Kingston so long. When first time I meet them, you're from Winnipeg, aren't you? And then it's kind of a sort of a running joke with my family. But at the end of the day, I've spent most of my life in Winnipeg. My wife is from here. It's just a scenario where, I kind of, with the coaching sort of carousel that kind of goes on in our business, I got an opportunity to go to some other teams to get some experience. Got it with the Rangers, got it with Washington, got it in Buffalo. So it was, everything kind of played itself out perfect last year when I got the opportunity to come back here. My kids are here, are close by anyways. My grandkids are close. Everything kind of fell into place. And so for me, it was just, coming back, obviously, the first years of being a player, being in the old Jets was the old building, great memories there. Now this is a whole new chapter, and, it's obviously, the game's changed a ton, and it's just, it's great to be back. And, I can see the whiteout last year for me was special, because of, the very first time it happened when we were playing Calgary, and, so many memories ago, and, it was awesome to see, and just wish we had gone, a few more rounds to continue to see that. But that was probably the biggest thing, just for seeing that again, kind of getting those juices flowing.
A little bit trippy there, looking at us from the interview. We're not wearing the same clothes, just for the record. We're not wearing the same clothes. I was wearing an IC hoodie that day. I'm wearing a Clear Lake hoodie today. Dave was wearing, I think, a different, same hat, but different sweatshirt. Same color, though.
Sure.
But that
different color sweat. No, I'm wearing a blue hoodie today.
Yeah.
I was wearing my IC black zip up, and just Dallas asked the question if you've ordered some IC gear. We're hopeful that it'll be out this week. So stay tuned for that development. If when I hear further from it, I did inquire, and I was told that it was being completed this past week. So I hope the stuff will be going out next week. And so we're sorry for the delay.
Yes, we are sorry for the delay. But there's Scott Arniel. We'll have some little bit more about Scott Arniel. There's some interesting answer talking about the role of an assistant and associate coach, how it's changed over the years that I want to get to. But, I just wanted, for the interest of the audience, that was back in February. So obviously he was still the associate head coach of the Winnipeg Jets at that point in time. He hadn't been yet given the head coach, but you could sort of see the passion that he has. You can hear it in his voice, how much respect he has for Rick Bowness, and how much desire he has for the city of Winnipeg, and how much affinity he has for the city of Winnipeg. So I totally understand some of the reticence that's out there, and I get that. But I also don't, and going back to what we said off the start at the beginning of the show, I don't think that just because he might not necessarily be your number one choice, or just because he's not the shiny new object, doesn't mean he can't do the job. There's, for a lot of these coaches, it's about the opportunity. And so he's now got that opportunity. And if he flames out in this opportunity, that'll be his final opportunity as a head coach. But I do believe that he's learned. I do believe that he's got his own approach to it. He's his own man. He's not necessarily just a Rick Bowness clone. So I do think you'll see things done differently than were done under Rick Bowness when he was still the head man. And even when Scott Arniel was in there as the interim head coach, when Rick was away from the team, I think that as the interim, you're not going to throw out what the head coach has sort of built there. You're not going to change things. You're very much still in a placeholder role, but at the same time, the players did respond to him even in that placeholder role, Dave.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case, Drew. And I think that, again, we live in a society where we judge things instantaneously, and we live in a society where, a guy gets drafted and you want him to play in your organization the next day. And that's the way life is right now. And to me, my whole philosophy is simply that, I have a belief that people can change, and I have a belief that people can evolve, and that folks can be different the second time around. Now, look, the Jets didn't get out of the second round, past the first round, and into the second round the last 2 years. And it's been a trend, right? Since 17-18, other than obviously the bubble year when they swept the Oilers, which, if you're a Jets fan from the 80s, felt pretty good. But the fact of the matter is that, this is a team that we've been hearing about for years, has been a team that is supposed to get to the next level. Now, look, it's not easy. Colorado is a hell of a good team. Now, obviously, what happened with Valerie Nichushkin derailed them significantly. But Colorado, everybody was talking about how Colorado was going to steamroll Dallas. And then Dallas, gets the upper hand. And then everybody talked about Dallas is going to steamroll the Oilers. And now the Oilers are up in that series. Now, it's only one game, obviously. But I'm just saying that there are very good teams that get eliminated every year, right? So Vegas, right? They're a very good team. They got eliminated in the first round as well after winning the cup. So you have teams that get eliminated, and then it creates a soul-searching need. But the Jets have a lot of question marks, and in terms of their personnel, like, there's so much that we don't know. There's so much uncertainty. So all I'm saying is, I'm not here to wave pom-poms and say this is the best hire in the history of the world. And again, do I think Todd Nelson would have been a good head coach? I mean, the one thing that you have to look at, and the one thing I think that's critical in terms of evaluation is, when you look at just simply at a record on paper, does it give you are you, paying attention to what it is? Look, the teams in Grand Rapids, the Detroit Red Wings, who are the parent club of Grand Rapids, who Todd Nelson won his first Calder Cup with. I mean, they're a team like the Jets who marinate their prospects and build up their AHL affiliate. So he had a good team. He had an excellent team in Hershey, led by Winnipegger Dylan McElrath, who was the captain. So I'm just saying that, Hershey is known, similar to the Chicago Wolves, as an organization that loads up their farm club and always has a good farm team and always has a team that competes. So I'm just saying that it's just, again, I'm not diminishing his winning pedigree. He's definitely won. But again, there's different philosophies in organizations, right? For the Moose, for example, they had the youngest or second youngest team in the AHL this year. They played their center depth was Brad Lambert, Danny Zhilkin, and Chaz Lucius.
Youth.
Yeah, but 3 Jets prospects who were all given an opportunity. Like, you can't win games realistically, I'm sorry, at the pro level with guys who are in their first or second year of pro hockey. But the Jets organization made a philosophical decision with their AHL organization to play these guys at center. And when did they start winning? Well, unfortunately for them, it's when Chaz Lucius and Danny Zhilkin got injured, and they were able to move guys who were more experienced into the role of center. But the organization was willing to take the pain of losing in order to give Chaz Lucius the 2021 first rounder, or Danny Zhilkin the third rounder, or Brad Lambert their first rounder, the opportunity to develop at center at the pro level. So I'm just saying that it's just important to understand that organizations have different philosophies. And again, you can have winning and youth still playing, but I'm just saying that when you play that many young centers, you're saying, listen, we're going to give these guys an opportunity, but it's going to come with a little bit of pain.
Yeah, it certainly will. But with that pain comes growth. Growing pains is my son likes to wake up every morning and say he's having growing pains. Based on that, he's going to be 12 feet tall. But growing pains work for 6-year-olds, and they also work for hockey players as well. And you hope you come out on the other side a better player, a taller boy, whatever it might be, in both of those growing pain situations. Let's go to break. One final break for this Saturday morning. When we come back, some interesting quotes from Brad Berry. Brad Berry is the University of North Dakota Fighting Hawks head coach. He was an assistant coach with Scott Arniel. Brad is actually also going to join us on the show next Saturday, but he did speak with Mike McIntyre and Ken Wiebe. So I want to bring some of those quotes up to the forefront for further conversation. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, we're discussing the Jets' hiring of Scott Arniel as their new head coach. It's a Saturday morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouthguard to protect those pearly whites?"
"I sure do."
Whoa, they even ting through the mouthguard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
It's all over, folks, and the run has come to an end.
You'll be so far away.
A Canadian team hasn't won the Cup in over 30 years.
And the Cup will stay south of the border.
Maybe it's time we try something different. This playoff season, let's cheer with the fans we've always cheered against. Team up for the Cup at Boston Pizza.
Hey Winnipeg, Wendell Clark here. I'm coming out there May 28th for the Rady JCC dinner. Myself, Dougie Gilmore, Grant Fuhr. Some good storytelling about Winnipeg beating us up when we used to come there. See you there.
We did it again!
You're on fire, man.
There's power in a handshake after a great game or great deal. It shows professionalism and respect. Two qualities Zappia Group Realty take pride in. You don't build a business where 95% of your clients are referred by others without honesty, integrity, and total dedication to client satisfaction. To sell your home for more in less time, shake hands with Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Get started at zappiagroup.com.
Bottom of hour number 2. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, just flying by on this Saturday morning. Always appreciate when the Jets make a coaching hire or a big trade or something along those lines. Right on either that Saturday morning or late Friday opportunity. That's perfect for us.
Look, Drew, we got the Patrick Laine trade on the Saturday morning. So we really, after that was the biggest thing since the Jets returned, really. Yeah. So we couldn't have asked for anything better on that Saturday morning. Back in what year was that? Was that 2019?
Yeah, it would have been pre-pandemic, right? No, it was
2020.
It was 20 because it was during because that's when Dubois came over and he had to quarantine for a couple of weeks and everything else. I sort of felt bad for Hassan Remus yesterday that Winnipeg Sports Talk goes off air and then 30 minutes later is when the announcement is made. It's unfortunately timing is everything, like they say in broadcasting and in all sorts of things like that. I want to put up on the screen. I'm not sure if everyone's going to be able to read it, but nonetheless, I'm going to put it there. Maybe I can make it even a little bit bigger. This is from today's Winnipeg Free Press. It's an interview that our
You're
friends.
Drew, you're gonna have to read it anyways because the people on the podcast are.
Okay, I'm going to read it anyways, but I thought I'd throw it up on the screen. Ken Wiebe, Mike McIntyre, they spoke with Brad Berry. Brad Berry is the head coach of the University of North Dakota. As I mentioned, he's going to join us next Saturday on the show. I was texting with him yesterday, and he wasn't able to join us today, but he's in for next Saturday. And he worked with Scott Arniel, both as an assistant in Columbus and before that as an assistant with the Manitoba Moose. Here's what Brad Berry had to say. Quote, he has an overall great feel for the game, a great feel of the personnel that he's coaching and the way he communicates with players and the connection that he builds, the relationship that he builds with them. And that's certainly very much in the same parallel as Rick Bowness. We know how the biggest, I guess, credit to Rick Bowness is just how good of a human being he is and how much his players loved and respected him. And here's Brad Berry saying similar things. And for all those, concerned about the previous record for Scott Arniel when he was coaching in Columbus, Brad Berry says the following. You know what? He's grown exponentially. Nothing replaces experience. As much as you prepare going through those situations, that makes you grow. The best part for Scott Arniel, is that he took a lot of time thinking about his first time around being an NHL head coach. And ultimately after that, through his different stops of coaching, he grew from those experiences. The coaches that have success are the ones that know you have to change and you have to adapt and you have to learn from your past experiences. And I think he's done that. I feel he's obviously ready to take the reins again, and I think he'll do an outstanding job. So that's Brad Berry, University of North Dakota head coach, talking about the new Jets head coach in Scott Arniel, Dave. And I mean, to no one's surprise,
Brad Berry hired as an associate coach on Monday.
Well, I mean, again, for all those in the chat and those listening on the podcast and saying things like, well, what is he going to say? Yes, you're absolutely right. He's not going to shit all over him. That would be a stunning turn of events. And for those of you saying, yeah, but what about what Mike Commodore said? And yes, absolutely. That's a fair comment to point to put back. But what you hear and what I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, Scott Arniel, is what Brad Berry had to say there, that he's grown since Columbus. He's grown through his experiences in New York and in Washington. And he's grown so that he's not the same head coach that he was a decade ago when it didn't work out. And that's really all you want to hear. And now obviously the proof is going to be in the pudding and you want to see that come to fruition on the ice. But the positive signs, at least, are there of a human being evolving, learning from their previous challenges, learning from their previous mistakes, garnering that experience, gathering that education, and hopefully taking that information and building upon it moving forward.
Well, I mean, again, like I said, I'm somewhat confused as to the fact, like, is he entitled to get a job anywhere, or is it like once you've gotten one chance, is he done? Like even Pascal Vincent, who took over in unfortunate circumstances, a former assistant coach with the Jets and a head coach of the Manitoba Moose. Speaking of the Columbus curse, he takes over for Mike Babcock at the beginning of the season. He gets his first full head coaching gig, but even he's not guaranteed a role next year in terms of whether he's going to be the head coach. And would you say that he's deserving of a head coaching opportunity again? Like I just what I'm getting at, Drew, is, and I'm not against Todd Nelson. I wrote about Todd Nelson. I thought Todd Nelson would have been a good player, a good guy to speak to. I just think that he's had the benefit of having two good organizations in terms of teams that want their AHL teams to win and have given them the players. Like they signed Alex Limoges, they had Mike Scarbosa, they have Dylan McElrath. They have very good players on Hershey, and that's what you need in order to win, is very good teams. Now, you're right. Structure plays a big role. So I think Todd Nelson's a great coach. David Carl at the University of Denver. There's another, young up-and-coming coach. But was he coming to Winnipeg? And that's the other thing you have to ask is he going to wait for another opportunity? There's a chance in San Jose that, he could maybe have. So, and I've heard that with David Carl, with respect to him, who's, like I said, coach Team USA to World Juniors, so Rucker McGorty, of course. But Drew, he's another guy who may want to win another World Juniors next year. So that's, I think, is why he may be waiting to finish play, have another season at Denver, have another chance to win with the Team USA, and then maybe have his choice. So, he doesn't sound like a guy who was ready to make that jump to the NHL. I could be wrong, but that's just what I've gleaned from reading. Yeah. So again, like I said, Gerard Gallant, but Gerard Gallant didn't get the job in Toronto. He didn't get the job in New Jersey. He didn't get the job in a lot of other places, not just Winnipeg, who didn't hire Gerard Gallant, right?
And for whatever reason, he loses his job almost as quickly as he gets hired. And I don't know what there is there, but Gerard Gallant, who I also deem to be a quality NHL head coach, hasn't been hired for a while now. So what's going on there? There are so many unknowns, and
so much. And by the way, there's so many things that we never hear about, and you don't know. And look, to the point that folks will say, listen to the players. You have to listen to all of them. And a lot of players have spoken positively about Arniel. And so do we discount those ones who speak positively because there's guys who have spoken negatively? And again, like I said, and I'm sure, and I haven't done the homework to listen to what the Oilers, who had Todd Nelson for that one season when he took over in Edmonton, drew. I don't know what they said about him. And again, like I said, I'm sure that there's always going to be someone who has an axe to grind because they didn't feel their usage was sufficient. But, and again, you don't dismiss that out of hand. I'm just saying that there's a multitude of factors that go into these sort of selections, and we can't possibly know everything that is going on behind the scenes.
You absolutely cannot. You're right. And these are the great unknowns. And look, for Scott Arniel is either going to succeed or he's not. And that's not breaking news here, folks. And there's a lot that he has to change and probably a lot that he has to build upon. The penalty kill was atrocious last year. We know that. The penalty kill was good 2 years ago. He had responsibility for both. I expect him to be asked on Monday, what went wrong with the special teams? Why did they go from being a strength to being a weakness? And he, I assume, is already trying to figure out the answer to that. And the same question for the power play. Not that he was in charge of it, but that's certainly going to be a big question for this offseason if Brad Lauer is back as an assistant coach. And we don't know what the coaching staff is going to look like. We know there's going to be one new person behind the bench because Scott Arniel was obviously elevated up, so that opens up a vacancy. We don't know if there's going to be further vacancies beyond that. But that's what these are the next few weeks are going to figure out. That's what's going to happen over the next number of days. These are the questions that are going to be asked on Monday as Scott Arniel officially takes the reins of the Winnipeg Jets and says, okay, this is now my team. I'm familiar with it. I know the strengths. I know the weaknesses. How can I make the strengths better? How can I take the weaknesses and make them and improve upon them? Maybe there's still weaknesses, but maybe they're not as big of weaknesses as they were in years past. These are the questions for the offseason. This is what training camp is going to try and instill. That's what Scott Arniel is going to have to learn from over the course of the next few weeks and months. Going back to our interview with Scott Arniel from February, here's what he had to say, the role of the assistant coach, the role of the associate coach, and how that sort of changed over the years. Show, Scott, of course, is the Winnipeg Jets associate coach. Over your years as an assistant coach or an associate coach, how has the role changed? Obviously, I think your interactions with the players and how you approach that has probably changed over the last 10, 15 years. But, personally, how have you adapted over that time frame?
You know what? I think the biggest thing is when I started with a grumpy old guy, Randy Carlisle, and there was that kind of, like what you said was what had to be done, and there was a lot more barking and a lot more, kind of do it this way. I think the biggest thing that I've learned over the last, I don't know how many years now I'm at this, 15, 16 years, the biggest thing for me is having to figure out your players, how they tick, building relationships with them, getting the most out of them, kind of sort of some give and take, and building. The biggest thing is the relationship. It's so much different now that you have to have these guys believing in what you're saying. You have to get them believing in how you're kind of approaching things, why you're doing things. They want to be a part of everything. They really do. They want to have a say in kind of how things go about on the ice, system, line mates, all those things. Obviously, you got to how much you allow them to get away with. But at the end of the day, you do want to listen to their input, because they feel when they have the input, you're getting the best out of those players.
When you were a player, Scott, did you have any input at all, or did you just sort of coach said
No
what
chance.
you did and you went and did it?
No chance. I had John Ferguson. I mean, it was just like, be here, be there, do this, do that. And that's where the game's evolved. Now it's, it's certainly the players are a big part of what's kind of going on now. Hey, we just watched the skills competition there. That was a good move by McDavid. He made all.
There you go. That was Scott Arniel back in February during the All-Star break, talking about his role as the assistant coach, as an associate coach, and how that role has changed over the years. And it's the same is true, really, Dave, for any head coaching role, how the players themselves demand much more involvement. They demand a voice much more than they ever used to have from before. Again, we're not wearing the same clothes. It just looks like we're wearing the same clothes. Come on, people, stay with us here.
This is just a regular hoodie. The other one's a zip up. Come on, folks.
Big difference here.
And this one's blue and the other one's black.
I keep wondering, every time I look in my closet, I wonder to myself, how many hoodies is too many hoodies for an allegedly grown 43-year-old man to have in his closet and in his wardrobe? I don't think I've bought a new dress shirt in 5 years, but new hoodies keep appearing every now and then. So I think I'm reverting. I'm going back to dressing like a teenager, but that's okay. I like to be soft and cozy at the very least.
There you go. And these icy hoodies are very soft.
There you go. Those are all soft and cozy, is right. So that's, again, if you want to listen to the entirety of the Scott Arniel interview from back in February.
Doug says 3 is too many.
3 is too many? Okay, thank you, Doug. Well, then you're going to be
maybe he's talking about three people on the show is too many, and he should only have 2.
Or either that or hoodies, whatever it is. Either way, I'm afraid you're stuck with the hoodies. I can't say for sure.
Frosty is making a good point, because Rick came in to the interview late, so he was a little confused because it said, why did it say associate? But he wasn't confused by the fact that there were 2 of you and 2 of me. So good point by Frosty.
There you go. I think we need more of us is what it basically boils down to. So that's the news of the week for the Winnipeg Jets. It's, of course, Scott Arniel getting hired. Another big question also, now that box has been checked, and of course on Monday it'll be checked again with the press conference, then it really becomes Kevin Cheveldayoff's time. And he's got, we said, we're really only about 5 weeks away from the free agency. It's May 25th today somehow, which means that, the draft and all the assorted hoopla about that is a month from now, which means free agency is 5 weeks from now. So what is the Winnipeg Jets team going to look like, come training camp? Is there going to be a move with regard to Nikolai Ehlers? Does Sean Monahan re-sign? And I don't think that the two of those are necessarily not connected, because if they don't sign Monahan, I think the possibility of holding on to Ehlers increases dramatically, because look at your second line forward group at that point in time. Look at your forward group if you're without Sean Monahan and if you're without Nikolai Ehlers. Well, you're a lot thinner up front than you maybe necessarily thought you were, or that you ended the season that way. So these are the questions, I think, Dave, that are certainly the big ones now that need to be addressed over the next number of weeks.
For sure. But I mean, what have we spent a lot of time speaking about is how the Jets need to shore up the right side of their defense and improve it, because it wasn't good enough. So, I mean, how are you going to do that? I mean, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can be willing to trade assets, right? Prospects who you are very fond of, but you don't want it, you don't really have the draft capital this year. You only have 4 picks in the upcoming draft.
Right.
But, at the same time, you've got a lot of desirable prospects. You've got players who, you can't fit everybody into the lineup eventually. Right. So you're going to at some point have to cut bait, and you're going to have to make decisions, because you don't want to have situations like with, and again, I'm not lamenting this, but Johnny Kovacevic and Declan Chisholm, guys you put a lot of time and effort and money into, and then you lose them on waivers. So, that's what we said about Ville Heinola this year. I mean, he doesn't, you're not putting him on waivers. He'd get claimed, and you've put too much time and effort into him. So, it's going to be incumbent on him to be able to make an impact. Nothing is going to be handed to anyone, but from that perspective, you need to acquire the right side. We've talked about it. You re-sign Dylan DeMello. How good does Dylan DeMello look beside Dylan Sandberg as your second pairing? If you have someone in that, a true top right side defender. alongside Josh Morrissey.
Yeah, if you fill out your defense, properly, where you don't have guys. Look, Neil Pionk is going to be overpaid whatever role he plays, and he's not going to be suited for it. So Neil Pionk is not suited for a top 4 role, and he's overpaid for a third pairing role. So be it. Whatever. The money is the money. It's not your money. You don't have to worry about it. It's it's just
it's their money. They're fans. If they're paying for the tickets,
no.
It is
their
money.
Yes, but you know what I mean in the sense that they're not
already
paying
spent. The money's already spent. Is what
the money's spent. He's going to get that money regardless. So the question is, how do you fill in those gaps? How do you improve the defense, which was exposed? Again, I'm looking at it here. You take Monahan off that second line center role. Who fills in there? Because it seems like Cole Perfetti as a center, that ship seems like it's sailed. It doesn't seem like that's the mindset of the organization anymore.
Remember, Drew, that was the mindset of Rick Bowness,
right?
That doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, Kevin Sheldayoff talked about at the beginning of the season. I believe, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think he talked about Cole Perfetti as a potential center. Look, Brad Lambert played center. Brad Lambert excelled as a center. Now he's young. And, he's a 22 first rounder, but he gained. And if you didn't hear my Moose end of season roundtable last week with, Mark Morrison, with Craig Heisinger, you can listen to their assessment of Brad Lambert and what he was able to do. And again, where his growth was, because you always knew he was getting, he set the, all time Moose rookie records. He was, I think, second to Mason Appleton in terms of points. So he was able to score. He was able to have success in that regard. Not surprising, but it was on the defensive element of the game where he was able to kind of gain a lot of understanding. So, I mean, let's be realistic. What was the one area that Sean Monahan doesn't bring to this? He's smart He's smart defensively, not defensively. Sorry. He's smart on the power play.
Yeah.
And you liked what he brought, but of course he lacks a lot of speed. Right. Well, Brad Lambert doesn't lack speed, and he was defensively, he picked up his game. Now, is he ready to make a jump again? Now, he played pro in Finland, of course, worth noting, before going to junior last year to play in Seattle. But the fact is that, that to me is the question: is do you keep Brad Lambert as your 2C if you're not able to retain Sean Monahan? So that's a huge question, Mark. And again, like I said, I really liked Brad Lambert's game, and we'll see if he's able to make the jump. And there's no limitations. These guys, even and for the record, even when I spoke to Brad Lambert and I did my end of season with him, I said, did you end up, kind of very Finnish way of responding, but I said, guys set goals. Were you able to, achieve the goals that you set for yourself at the beginning of the season? And he goes, no, my goal was to win, and we didn't do that. So no.
Well, it's the team before individual mentality and everything else that players preach so much. But they also, again, don't kid yourself. They also do set individual goals, and even Lowry and Morrissey talked about that. He talked about the players needing to go and have a good offseason, and everyone needs to set individual plans for their offseason and individual goals for next year to come back and improve the team as a whole. So there's nothing wrong with having individual goals. Individual goals don't fly in the face of team goals. They're oftentimes can be hand in hand, all for the sole purpose of the team getting better. So those are, it's good to have those goals, certainly. But look, Sean Monahan, and I think the signing of Sean Monahan, if that happens, is a key tipping point for this offseason. This Winnipeg Jets forward group without Sean Monahan is a great big question mark. There is not a built-in second line center that's ready to step into that role without sort of a shadow of a doubt if it's not Sean Monahan. Can it be Brad Lambert? Sure, theoretically. We don't know, though. Can it be Cole Perfetti? Well, sure, that would be a change in how last year ended. Although, to your point, it is how the last year started, with the idea that Perfetti was going to be a center and going to have an extended look at center. Well, that extended look certainly did not last long, and then I don't think it was ever revisited again.
But then he also suffered that wrist or hand injury, right? So, that seemed to really limit his ability to take faceoffs.
True, definitely a factor. And was that the reason why he went to the wing, and the sole reason? I guess we'll find out, as time goes by.
And again, Drew, the other key with Monahan, and Andy Johnson saying that Monahan could be a great mentor. You also have to remember his injury history, right? So that's why the Brad Lambert opportunity isn't a bad one, but very easily, if you sign Monahan and he gets injured, which seems plausible, then you've got Lambert developing with the Moose, for a second straight year. Obviously, it's technically his third year, but he went down to Seattle after 14 games in his first year. But, he gets that. It's kind of like Kyle Connor, right? Had that first year with the Jets, didn't go well, got sent down, started the next year with the Moose, and then after 5 games was called back up and never looked back. So possible with Brad Lambert as well.
Well, it's interesting. I'm reading again. I'm on Daily Faceoff here, and I read this yesterday. I just wanted to pull it up. There was an article on Daily Faceoff yesterday talking about players, pending unrestricted free agents who increased their value and decreased their value throughout the course of the year. And one of the players who had the most what they call positive equity. This is according to the source is AFP Analytics. You can follow them on Twitter. I'm not overwhelmingly familiar with it, but it's Frank Saravelli's article, and you guys all know how much respect we have for Frank. He's been a long-time friend of this show. Monahan, in January, his projection, according to AFP Analytics, was 3 years at just under $3 million a year for his next contract.
Sign him
for that. Since then, so his May projection, so in the course of the 5 months or so between January and May, is now 4 years and $5.3 million per year. So that he's got an extra year on the contract based on the projections, and he's going to be making almost just under double what he was going to be making on an AAV from January. So there's a guy who's dramatically increased his value. Now, is he a $5.3 million player for the Winnipeg Jets? Are the Jets comfortable in signing him to that amount of money? Well, that's probably the going rate for a second line center. It doesn't strike me as completely out of whack, but of course the caveat, and you'll never know if a guy's going to get injured or not, is there is an injury history there. He's certainly not what I would describe as a young player. He's not old, but he's not, how old is Sean Monahan right now? He's 29. He'll be 30 at the start of the year. Yeah, he'll be 30 right when the season starts. So are you comfortable giving a guy like Sean Monahan for $5.5 million a year from 30 to 34 to fill in that second line center role? I don't know if you want to do it for 4 years, but
the Jets have been looking for a second line center since Brian Little was here. And even when Brian Little was still playing well, remember the Jets were looking for the heir apparent, and that was supposed to be Jack Roslovic, if you remember, the 2015 other first rounder. That Kyle Connor, of course, was the first rounder. Jack Roslovic was the second, I think, 25th overall, Drew, or something of that nature. But again, like the Jets chose to move him to the wing. I remember thinking how odd it was when he played 10 games in a row on the wing for the Moose, and then suddenly he was up with the Jets and he was playing on the wing. So the Jets have been looking for some sort of consistent second line center for 6-7 years, it feels like, and they're in a bit of a predicament because I personally don't think, especially if you're going to develop Brad Lambert as a center, I think you want to be signing someone for 4 years. I think that's all that's going to do is roadblock Lambert. Now you could say to yourself, but it doesn't make a lot of sense, is that, well, we can play Lambert as a winger, but then again, why did you just spend the last year? Why did Seattle made the decision to play him at center, which is where he was more comfortable. That's where he wanted to play. He played that role in Manitoba. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to move him to the wing. Again, you can. Obviously, Perfetti played as a center in junior, and now he's playing on the wing. Actually, speaking of Perfetti, it made me think of Saginaw in junior, and then, of course, Jacob Julian, the Jets' 5th rounder in 2023. He and the London Knights are starting their Memorial Cup run today, I believe. So they're going for their Memorial Cup. Everybody says the London Knights are a wagon, so we'll see if he can bring it home. But he had, I think, 9 goals and 9 assists in 18 games for London. So he's on he's garnering attention. That 2023 5th rounders for the Jets organization between him and Milic were it seemed like pretty good runs. But getting back to the question, Drew, just this idea of to me, you don't want to do what you did when you brought in Brendan Dillon and Nate Schmidt, because remember what that did. That created a logjam in front of your defense.
Sure.
And it kind of, now again, do we think that I mean, from that perspective, we thought, okay, well, it's going to maybe be something that's going to be temporary. That's why you really only want to see a 2-year deal, so Lambert could get in there eventually. I mean, I just think 3 or 4 years is just too long because Lambert's not.
I don't think you're getting it done for 2 years, though. I mean,
no. You're not. You're absolutely not. But I'm just saying that. Yeah, I mean, but you don't want it to be longer than 3. That's just the reality.
3 is probably the sweet spot. I mean, you never want to pay for a player, and it's ironic I'm saying this as the Scheifele and Hellebuck extensions are just getting started. But you don't want a player, pay for a player in their mid to late 30s because the performance and obviously begins to usually diminish.
Yeah.
With
you look
Monahan,
at the Blake Wheeler example. Remember when we signed that, we said it was going to be a bad contract. We said it's going to be a bad contract in the last couple of years, but you take it if you win a Stanley Cup. Right. And the truth is also that Wheeler went on those. I think he had those back-to-back 90-point seasons after he signed that deal. So he did well for the Jets. The Jets did well, and if they win a Stanley Cup, nobody looks at that deal and says it's terrible.
Right.
Well, it didn't work, so you buy him out, and then
it's a catch-22 because obviously the goal is to win a Stanley Cup, and the Jets this coming season aren't winning a Stanley Cup without a more established second-line center, i.e., Sean Monahan. But at the same time, you don't want it to block the younger player from coming up. So you have to sort of find a way to thread that needle a little bit difficultly, which isn't necessarily the easiest thing in the world to do. But that's reality of the NHL. You never want to block a player, but at the same time, you can't have a team of rookies because they're not going to, compete and take you as far as you need to go. And that's where the Winnipeg Jets are a little bit in that question period right now, not the politics version of question period, but that's where they checked off the first box in their offseason to-do list by hiring Scott Arniel yesterday. The announcement will come on Monday. Complete coverage on illegalcurve.com and on our YouTube channel. And then the other dominoes need to fall as you go over the next 5 or so weeks. And I'm not even talking about, the signing of the RFAs because that's going to happen, and that's going to be relatively it's going to happen whenever it happens. And it's probably not going to be till, it could very well be August when that happens. And that's no big deal whatsoever. But, the Jets need to figure out what they're doing on the back end. The Jets need to figure out what's going to happen up front with that, with Sean Monahan in particular. They've got the head coach job done. That one they've taken care of. Yes, Spency, it's true. We do have a website. I know we never mention it, but you can check it out. It's Dave M does great work on there. And I don't want to praise you like Kelly Moore did, because then your ego will really run amok, and then it'll be bad for everybody involved. But that is where the Jets are now at in their off-season to-do list, trying to figure things out and build this team in whatever way it's going to look, so that Scott Arniel has the ability to craft them and improve upon what they did this year, improve upon what they did last year, so that no longer are the Jets a out in 5-game first round fodder. They're more competitive beyond that second round, and then beyond there, who knows? But that's where the goal needs to be for this Winnipeg Jets team, because it'll be almost 7 years since they last made it past the first round back in 17-18 when they lost in the Western Conference Finals, Dave.
Joe from Winnipeg wants to know, it's Kenny. So many good comments today. KWB wants to know, does IC have an address that we can send our fan mail to?
Yeah.
Dave at illegalcurve.com. That you can just email it to us. We're not really big snail mail folks, but you can always just send me an email if you have a comment. Leave a comment on the YouTube channel. I always try and respond to those as best I can. And then Joe asked, do you guys sell podcast worn hoodies with stains on them on your website? No, we do not.
Sorry, I do. You're right, Snackatoba. I forgot the sweep of the Oilers in 2020. I always forget that. It's just because it happened during the bubble season, or the no fans in the stand season. It was such a bizarre anomaly that I do forget the first round sweep back in 2020, which I shouldn't. That did absolutely get the Jets to the second round, but it was such a weird time that it, for whatever reason, always never jumps to my mind as being something that occurred.
Drew, it really should, though, because if you recall, that was probably one of the best post-game shows we've ever done, when we had close to 1,000 people on the show, maybe over whatever it was,
at the wee hours of the middle of the night.
It was like 1:30 in the morning, I think, when Kyle Connor got that game winner, and I was up in the press box, and you were at home, and we were doing the show. And we did it till, I don't know, around 2:30, but it was crazy. There were so many people on the show. So that was definitely memorable and a unique situation. So yeah, Snacktoba has got it right. So lots of fun on that one for sure.
Lots of fun on that one. Lots of fun on this one as well. We appreciate everyone joining us this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Big thanks to Kelly Moore of 680 CJOB for joining us. In case you missed any of that interview, the instant replay of the show is available on the YouTube channel, and the podcast will be up shortly as well. We want to
just tell Comment, by the way, he should go to my brother Dan Manouk to get his will done if he needs to get a will. Just say, tell him IC sent you.
Dave giving his brother some love and some business.
625 Narren Avenue, folks.
Come on down.
Actually, it's funny. It's actually funny.
Kern Hill is just down the street.
I was going to say, so KMMG Law, no big deal. But if you right across the street is not across the street, by diagonal is after
Furniture Co-op.
After the law firm was on Henderson in Elmwood for 40 years, we made the move over to Nairn. So now we're 625 Nairn. If you want to. If you need a will done, real estate, anything, come on down.
There you go. If you're looking to divorce Ezzy like we are, then that's where we like to go. Big thanks to all the sponsors of Illegal Curve. We make the post-game show, the Saturday show, the website a possibility. That's our friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club. Rumors, Caitlin Palufo in town. All shows sold out. It's been a great week with Caitlin Palufo at Rumors. Our friends at Grid Park, be sure to use code Illegal Curve. You'll get some good stuff that way when you need to park with our friends at Grid Park. Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Betway, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, and of course our friends at Seagram. Support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. All three of us will be back next week on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, 9 a.m. next Saturday. Of course, the website, illegalcurve.com. That's going to be constantly updated throughout the course of the week. Monday, going to be a big day with the Scott Arniel press conference. We'll have it covered in its entirety, both here on the YouTube channel and on the website as well. Be sure to check that out on Monday. And of course, when news breaks, be sure to tune to our YouTube channel and illegalcurve.com for all your latest. Hope everybody has a great rest of your weekend and maybe dry out. Maybe keep working on building that arc. You might need it based on the continual forecast, but I think the sun will come out one day again soon. For Dave Manouk, I'm your host, Drew Mandel. Smash the like button. If it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Have a great rest of your weekend.